Hey folks, so I wanted to cover the BDS Team Heretics game that happened just earlier today because I think there is some really cool little tidbits here within draft that allowed BDS to get away with some picks that are normally illegal. And they kind of took the hint as to what champions were picked on the side of Heretics, and that means basically what things they're giving up in exchange, and they take advantage of the things they gave up in order to allow themselves new options for picks. So, what do I mean by this? Let's start with the overall sort of dynamic of the draft based on the bans. So on the LEC patch, we're still having trouble with the Senna Seraphine combos because BDS actually end up banning both of them because both champions can create their own unique combos. So let's say, for example, most people would think just ban Senna and it's fine, but you actually don't because you can pick Seraphine Degeneracy combos. We've even seen G2 bust out like Sona Seraphine and it really almost worked. So there's a lot of really weird combos with it and people can cook and people just don't want to be dealing with it right now. So a bit of an adaptation here by BDS. I really like this because I've always been saying in this patch, not very many mid laners available, so you may as well just take Azir and deal with it, right? Because more likely than not, you're going to have it in your repertoire anyway. You're not really showing much by picking Azir B1. And in my eyes, you know, the logic could be that there's no other priority pick that they'd want to go for. You could argue, well, watch, they gave up Rumble to Heretics, right? And then you're like, whoa, that's so weird. But this is where the pivot point comes in. And this is a trade-off that BDS was willing to make. A very risky trade-off, might you add, but something that could be considered here. So after the Varus pick, BDS actually respond with Vi, pretty normal. And then they actually go Jhin. So normally, Jhin is a decent blind in terms of his matchups, and he can fare well against a lot of these cringe ADCs that give a lot of problems in lane. Jhin has a great time in lane because of fleet footwork and his ability to trade short, and because this is of his 4 auto shotgun. So he can just trade 1 auto for 1 auto and usually come out ahead because he'll have slightly more AD. And there's that. The main caveat with the Jhin is that it tends to be risky into a lot of compositions because of its weakness to tanks. So a lot of the times when you're early blinding Jhin, you'll find that you'll have a lot of trouble when the team ends up drafting a lot of tank stats. However, the main areas that we're going to see tanks in this meta are jungle, right? Support doesn't really count. Even if you're picking an engaged support, I don't count it that much because they're not that tanky. So it's jungle. Let's say if it's like a really tanky jungler, but that's not really the case right now, and top. And for top, I really just thinking of Cassante. But you see that Heretics have already locked Rumble because BDS gave it to them. So therefore, this is a unique case where Jhin is actually allowed because there's not many cases where this Jhin is going to get or become useless, in fact. So on 4, they're probably going to pick support here because actually they could really go for either option. I believe they're missing support in jungle on the side of Heretics, so both are good in this case. It's just really contingent on where they identify there's more flexibility. I would lean towards support because having on R5 because there's more options, because you can play front to back, you can play more poke, you can play engage. Like there's so many different things you could go for. But depending on what Heretics want, they go for the Nautilus. If it were me, I would probably just tank it and go for a standard jungler on 4, you know, because that's probably what's going to be picked anyway. Let's say things like the Trundle, things like the Xin Zhao. There's a lot of options here. Lee Sin even. Things that just would do their job as a jungler, right? Generic junglers. Cassante is picked because now, wow, BDS, they have a chance to play for a bot because good matchup and they get counter pick support. So, wow, very good draft. Therefore, actually a little bit of a fumble by pushing jungle to 5, unless they cook like a Fiddlesticks or something like that. I don't know. But look at that. They picked jungle anyway. So I really like the main pivot point here is definitely that they're like, hey, you guys can have Rumble because the only way we're allowed to pick this Jhin is that when we are able to, after you pick your Rumble pick. That's the main idea here. And because of that, they actually quote unquote get counter picks in pretty much all the right areas, right? They blind top, they blind mid because these are the two blindable champions in the game. Then they pretty much counter their comp in the key areas that matter. Now you end up in a situation where BDS, the Rumble is actually useless because of Cassante, and then you pretty much have good matchups. The good matchup bot side for both laners, I would say, and it contributes into your entire composition. So now, how this works is that Heretics are very incentivized to kind of just go in because they're not going to be able to handle what BDS, in a normal scenario, front to back, like they're obviously just going to lose. So Heretics are like, hey man, there's not much we can do about that, and they have to force fights, and it's fine. But BDS have a lot of tools now to be able to handle this, and I think that was off the fact that they got a lot of leverage from that pick. So just wanted to point that out. Thought it was cool.